When the past fell apart, I chose to start over. From rock bottom to the light, a woman's journey to rebuilding herself. My name is Anna, I'm 34 years old, and I decided to write this because I know many people carry pain they find impossible to overcome. My story isn't pretty, but it's true. I was once married to Ricardo, and I believed with all my heart that I had found the man of my dreams. We built a life together, dreamed of children, made plans that I thought would last forever. Until, one day, everything fell apart in the worst possible way. I was betrayed not only by my husband, but by my own sister, Juliana. This discovery shattered me inside. At the time, I was 29. Life seemed to be going well. I had a stable job, supportive friends, and a family that, in my mind, was solid. I always admired my sister, despite our differences. I never imagined she would be capable of crossing the most painful line anyone can cross. When I found out they were together, it felt like my entire body shut down. I couldn't breathe properly, my heart was racing, and I thought I was going to faint. Discovering the betrayal wasn't a coincidence. I put the pieces together myself, the messages, the glances, the half-hearted apologies. I remember it like it was yesterday, a phone forgotten in the living room, a notification flashing on the screen, and my life turned to dust. It was a message from him to her, full of intimacy, leaving no room for doubt. I trembled, unsure whether to scream, cry, or tear the phone into 1,000 pieces. That was the trigger for a pain that lasted years. I separated, of course, but the wound remained. What no one talks about is that betrayal doesn't end on the day of separation. It continues in the small moments. When you wake up and feel the empty side of the bed, when you hear a song that was once yours, when you walk into a room and remember a conversation or a touch. I felt dirty, deceived, discarded. The worst part was having been replaced by my sister, the same one who grew up with me, shared a room, games, and secrets. After the separation, I distanced myself from almost everyone. I didn't want family parties. I didn't want to hear my name alongside theirs. But my parents never accepted my estrangement. They believed that family is family, and that I needed to forgive. They said life was too short to hold grudges. The problem was, it wasn't grudges. It was pain. And every time they pressured me, the wound bled anew. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to feel nothing anymore. 5 years passed. I'd rebuilt myself somewhat. I went back to school, invested in myself, and started traveling alone. But I still had scars. Until one day, my parents showed up at my house to give me some news. Juliana was pregnant. They asked, almost begged me to leave everything behind and embrace this new phase of the family. It was like a knife in the gut. I smiled on the outside, but inside I felt a lump in my throat that nearly choked me. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked around the house like a shadow. I remembered all the times my ex-husband said he wanted to be a father, that he dreamed of having children with me, and now he was going to be a father with her, the person who hurt me the most. I felt like everything I'd ever experienced had been stolen. My body trembled, my hands sweated, and I couldn't even swallow water. It was like reliving the day I discovered he'd cheated. Driven by anger and despair, I did something I never thought I would. I texted Ricardo. It was an unfiltered outburst, full of pent-up resentment. I told him he had destroyed my life, that his pregnancy with my sister was proof I'd never meant anything. I wrote with shaking hands, crying so hard I could barely see the screen. I wanted him to feel at least a sliver of the pain I'd carried all these years. What I didn't expect was for him to answer me. More than that, he wanted to meet me. I was reluctant, but curiosity and the need to understand led me to accept. We met at a discreet cafe. He looked worn, tired, carrying years of guilt on his face. And then he said something that shook everything, that he had never stopped loving me, that his marriage to Juliana was a facade, and that the pregnancy wasn't his. I was devastated. I didn't know whether to laugh at him or cry. Part of me wanted to believe him, because there were still remnants of who I once was. But another part only saw manipulation. I took a deep breath and asked, "So why did you stay with her?" He said it was a mistake, an escape, and that he'd lost his way. I didn't want to hear excuses, but as he spoke, I pressed record on my phone. That became my weapon. When I got home, I played that recording over and over. Every word he said he still loved me. Every confession about his empty marriage. Every detail about the pregnancy that wasn't his. It was surreal. I didn't know if it made me stronger or more destructive, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to keep this to myself. My parents needed to hear it. They'd been dreaming up a lie for years, and I was ready to throw the truth in their faces. The following Sunday, I called my parents to talk. They arrived with that look of anticipation, thinking I would finally give in. I took a deep breath, placed my phone on the table, and pressed play. Their silence as they listened to Ricardo's confession was deafening. I saw my mother's face pale, and my father didn't know where to look. When the recording ended, no one said anything for a few seconds. Then, their world fell apart. That's how the truth came out. The baby Juliana was expecting wasn't Ricardo's. Their marriage was in tatters, and the image of the perfect family my parents had tried to maintain was shattered. Juliana hated me even more, of course, but I no longer cared. For the first time in years, I felt like I had regained control of my story. The truth, raw and unvarnished, had come out, and I no longer had to carry the weight of the lie alone. In the following months, the family fell apart. Juliana and Ricardo separated, they fought badly, and my parents were forced to deal with reality. I distanced myself from it all. It wasn't revenge, it was survival. I needed peace. I began investing even more in myself. I entered therapy, started running, and adopted a dog, which became my inseparable companion. Each small step was a way of telling myself that I deserved a different life. Still, I won't lie. There were days when I felt broken. Sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, remembering the past. Sometimes I wanted to scream to the world that I'd been wronged. But I gradually learned to silence those voices. I learned that I didn't need applause or validation. What I needed was freedom. And that's exactly what I began to achieve. One of the turning points in my life was when, in one of my therapy sessions, the psychologist asked me, "Do you want to continue living with the pain they caused, or start building something of your own?" That struck a chord. I realized that for years my identity had revolved around betrayal. I was the woman betrayed by her sister and her husband, and I no longer wanted to be just that. I wanted to be the woman who stood up, who put down new roots, who built a different story. That's when the idea of artificial insemination came to me. I was never against becoming a mother, but after everything, I'd given up on the idea of relying on a partner for it. When I told my family I was considering insemination, they were shocked. My father said I was being radical. My mother asked if it wasn't too much loneliness. But I knew it was the way to free myself from all the ties that had bound me to the past. I wanted to be a mother on my own terms. At first, the process was daunting. Consultations, tests, paperwork to sign. Each step felt like a plunge into the unknown. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to handle it. Afraid. I'd regret it. Afraid I was acting on impulse. But along with the fear came a sense of empowerment. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone's validation. I didn't need a husband. I didn't need my family's approval. I just needed to believe I could do it. I remember the day I had the procedure. I was nervous. My hands were sweating and my heart was racing. But at the same time, I felt a strange calm, as if I were finally choosing for myself. I left the clinic exhausted, but with a hope I hadn't felt in a long time. I spent the next few days in a whirlwind of anxiety, trying not to get my hopes up, and at the same time praying for the outcome. When the pregnancy test came back positive, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. It wasn't a cry of pain. It was a cry of relief, of victory. I held that result in my hands and thought, now, yes, my life begins again. I didn't care if anyone would judge me, if they would call me crazy. I knew I was ready to be a mother, ready to live according to my choices, not the consequences of others' choices. During pregnancy, a lot went through my head. I remembered how I'd been destroyed, and now I found myself rebuilding from the inside, literally. Each ultrasound felt like proof that I'd made the right decision. I talked to my baby alone, telling him he was the fruit of my courage, not my pain. This gave me strength on the days when the memories came back, because they still did. But this time, I had something bigger to focus on. Juliana and I don't speak anymore. Sometimes my mother tries to force a connection, but I always say I'm not ready, and maybe never will be. I don't wish her any harm, but I also don't want her in my life anymore. Ricardo, on the other hand, disappeared. After the mess of the divorce, he vanished from town. I don't miss him, and that's one of the biggest proofs that I've truly moved on. Ultimately, my parents had to accept the new reality. They still try to stay in touch with Juliana, but they know their relationship will never be the same. With me, they gradually began to respect my choices. They saw that I was happy with the pregnancy, that I wasn't as broken as before. I think they realized that, as much as they tried to push reconciliation, I just needed space to write my own story. At work, I became a beacon of strength. People saw me pregnant and alone and always commented on how confident I seemed. They didn't know the holes I'd had to fill inside myself to get there. But, in a way, it motivated me. I didn't want to be a role model for anyone, but seeing that my attitude inspired other women made me proud. It was like turning scars into fuel. There was one day in particular that I'll never forget. I was home, alone, stroking my already large belly, and I realized I no longer felt angry. Remembering the past didn't hurt. It was as if I'd finally left the burden behind. I felt a peace I'd never known. I cried again, but this time silently, giving thanks for having survived it all. It was that day that I realized I didn't need anything else to feel whole. I won't romanticize it. Being a single mother is challenging. I knew it would be, but every challenge has a different flavor when it's the result of a choice rather than an imposition. Every kick I felt inside me was like a reminder. You won. I prepared myself for the sleepless nights, the exhaustion, the enormous responsibility, and at the same time, I prepared myself to love like I'd never loved before. Looking back today, I see a clear line. I needed to be broken to rebuild myself stronger. That doesn't mean I'm grateful for what happened. No, I didn't need that pain to grow. But since it happened, I decided it wouldn't be in vain. I turned the wound into a scar, and the scar into history. And that's what I want to convey. No one should be trapped by what was done to us. When I think of Ricardo, I don't feel hate. I feel pity. He missed the chance to live a real life and drowned himself in lies. As for Juliana, I feel distance. She made choices that destroyed a lot, and I have no obligation to fix anything for her. My priority now is my son and the life I'll build with him. That's all that matters. The birth of my son was the most intense moment of my life. The pain of labor was immense, but it doesn't compare to the pain I've already endured, because I knew that pain had a purpose. When I heard his first cry, I felt like all the pieces finally fell into place. I looked at that tiny being and thought, nothing and no one will take this away from me. In those first few days home, between sleepless nights and endless tears, I found myself looking at him several times and wondering what it would have been like if my life had followed the old path. And each time I concluded, no, this was the right path. I had to go through all that to get here. Not because it was fair, but because I made a turning point. Today, I'm not the woman who was betrayed. I'm the woman who chose to be a single mother. The woman who survived abandonment and family pressure. The woman who said no to reconciliation, who said no to ties, and who said yes to herself. This makes me proud. And even on difficult days, when I feel like I can't handle it, just looking at my son reminds me of the strength within me. I know many people still judge me. Some say I overreacted, that I should have forgiven, that I didn't need to expose the truth. Others think being a single mother is irresponsible. I've learned not to care, because in the end, we are the ones who carry the weight of life. And I chose to carry the weight of freedom, not chains. Writing this here, I realize how far I've come. Years ago, I could barely talk about the betrayal without crying or trembling. Today, I tell it as part of my story, not as an open wound. This is liberating. It's as if I've closed a book that imprisoned me and started another, a blank one, full of possibilities. My greatest victory wasn't exposing the truth. It was exposing myself to myself. It was looking in the mirror and seeing a whole woman, even after being broken into pieces. It was proving to myself that I could trust myself again, that I could love myself again. That's the kind of victory no one can take away. If you're reading this and you've also been through something that shattered you, I want to tell you, it doesn't have to be the end. The pain can be unbearable. It can make you think you'll never truly smile again. But there's life after the fall. There's strength within us that only emerges when it seems like it's no longer possible. I'm proof of that. I won't say that time heals everything. Time alone heals nothing. What heals is what we do with it. I chose to transform my pain into movement, into decision, into a new beginning. It was difficult, it was painful, but it was possible. And if it was possible for me, it can be for you too. Today, when I think about the future, I no longer feel fear. I feel curiosity, a desire to live, and a desire to show my son that no matter what others do to us, what matters is what we do with it. This is the legacy I want to leave him: courage and freedom. Betrayal destroyed a part of me, but it also opened space for another to emerge. And this new part is more authentic, stronger, more aware of what it deserves and what it no longer accepts. I'm not perfect, but today I'm true to myself, and that's enough. I write this story as a way to close the cycle, not because everything is resolved, but because I know I will never again be the same woman who knelt on the floor crying for the pain others caused me. Today, I stand up. Today, I walk with my head held high, knowing I deserve to be where I am. I'm no longer a hostage to the past. I'm the author of my present. And if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's this: no matter who breaks you, there's always a chance to rebuild yourself. And the rebuilding can be even more beautiful than the previous version. I'm living proof of that.